too.
I loved LA to the point where, look, I don't want to use the word infatuated, but the people, the food, the history is everywhere in this city. And I want to see it all. And I want to be that information station that takes it in and then relays it to everybody in fun little tidbits and facts. And I've carried that with me through to LA in a minute. And it's sort of instilling that in my family these days.
So, Evan Lovett, LA in a minute.
I have been listening to and watching LA in a Minute stories for a long time now.
Yeah.
And I always thought, this guy is so fascinating and so smart, like just a real journalist kind of guy.
Totally. What he knows about all the different neighborhoods and establishments and all this history of LA that makes it so unique, and certainly in West Hollywood. And I think, and I'm sure you'll agree with me, his enthusiasm for this city, it's infectious.
Yeah, dude's got some energy.
Yes,
Yeah.
in the best way.
Yeah,
Really.
This is a great listen for sure. Let's start.
Let's start. We'll get started here. Really, Evan, by the way, thank you so much for joining us. This is really awesome. The man, the myth, the legend, video creator, podcast host of LA in a Minute.
Thank you for having me. Very much appreciate being here.
So, I mean, we love what you've been creating and what you've been doing, not only for Los Angeles, but you touch on all the different neighborhoods, obviously including West Hollywood. And you've got a really interesting story. So we figured that you would be, we want to hear all about it. So tell us a little bit about your story.
I mean, how much in depth do you want me to go? Just as far as LA in a minute, or the whole story? Because I don't know how much time we have here.
Yeah, the
You're a
beginning.
native Angelino.
Yeah.
Okay,
So go back to the start.
I was born in what was called Sepulveda. It's now known as North Hills, the geographic center of the San Fernando Valley.
Nice.
So I always, I guess, in that sense, sort of carried a chip on my shoulder, or at least an awareness of the valley and the people who've come from the valley and made the valley great. You know, Val Kilmer went to Chatsworth High School, or, you know, in a baseball sense, John Carlos Stanton and Hunter Green went to Notre Dame High School. So I always carry these things where it's like, no, the valley's produced greatness and great people.
Totally.
And it has a great history and a great culture. But that was instilled by my parents, both of whom loved Los Angeles, and they'd go to they'd leave the valley. They'd go to Venice Beach. I remember many trips to the boardwalk, Venice boardwalk in the 80s. We'd go to Griffith Park, but they'd take me around. My dad was a boxing manager, so his gym was at 108th and Broadway in South LA. So at a young age, I was getting we'd go to the Coliseum. We used to go see Showtime Lakers at the Forum. Out to Boyle Heights, we go to this place, El Tepeyac, and get the biggest burrito in LA and bring it home for the family and for our neighbors. And Manuel's burrito, by the way, still is the biggest burrito in LA. But
Ooh, noted.
But I loved LA to the point where, look, I don't want to use the word infatuated, but it just always resonated. Even throughout traveling, I was this cornball that I'd land back at LAX or Burbank Airport and just be like, yes, glad to be home. Like, I love going places, but so good to be back in LA. And that was instilled from a young age. And, you know, I became a journalist in college. I was a sports editor for the UCLA Daily Bruin, then worked for the LA Times for a little bit. So I had that journalistic like spirit.
Yeah.
And I've carried that with me through to LA in a minute. And it's sort of instilling that in my family these days. I don't know if you want to go into how LA in a minute actually launched.
That's the next question. Yeah, just tee yourself up right
I also want to ask quickly, because you said you worked for LA Times?
Yes.
So
actually,
when was that? Because
1998 to 2000, I started as a stringer, which is basically just covering high school games. And you hustle back. There wasn't the internet like it is now. So you hustle back and like file the report in the office. They hired me on as this low-level sports reporter, but still a sports reporter, so I got bylines, and I was covering stuff like women's golf at USC or volleyball in Orange County, and I was turning 21 at this time, and my friends were partying, often in West Hollywood, but I'd be down in Orange County, have to go back to the downtown LA office, file the story. It's 12:30, 1 o'clock by the time I get out, no partying for a 21-year-old. So somewhere along the line, somebody was like, dude, just go into PR. It's the same thing as journalism, only it pays better and the hours are better.
Okay.
That wasn't true.
Okay.
It was a terrible vocation, but it was a springboard into online advertising.
don't tell my PR guy this. No, that's not good. That's
at
not
the time. Hey, maybe it's changed in the years since. But I I go back, I start applying for jobs. This is when Monster.com was a thing. And there was a job that said sports PR. And I was like, oh, this is perfect because love sports. And now, okay, I get the kind of journalism in the sports. Was not sports and it was not PR. It was online advertising at a company called Vindari Group, which was like a email powerhouse at the time. And that was had this .com atmosphere, McDonald's balls, pastel walls, all this kind of stuff. Anyways, great profession for like a 20-something kid.
Yeah.
Left the journalism behind, although I always had the itch to create stuff, right? So I had blogs when blogging was a thing.
Yeah.
I did email newsletters when that became a thing. And I was always, the money was good and the profession was good, but it was unfulfilling. So I was always trying to create stuff. But one of my early CEOs called me an information station. He's like, you love getting information, you love disseminating that information, which again is kind of what journalism is at its core. But I always remember that because I would be that guy that would text my friends just random factoids about Los Angeles. Like, did you know Formosa Cafe used to be, or was one... The story went. There's no Jimmy Bernstein won it in a poker game, right? The famous Formosa Cafe with the red car train attached. Or Denny's started as Danny's Donuts. Or Taco Bell was influenced by, it actually used to serve hamburgers. It was Bell's Burgers. But Glenn Bell saw this Mexican restaurant, Meat La Cafe, which still stands across the street, serving hard shell tacos. So he totally switched up the business model. So I'd always text my friends and stuff. Sometimes they'd be like, who cares, dude? I haven't been to a Denny's in years. Sometimes he'd be like, that's crazy. I love Taco Bell midnight runs. And now I know the story. So flash forward to my son when he was 8 years old. Yeah. This was in like around Christmas time of 2021. And he's getting into screens. And having the battle over screen time with a kid is always a difficult proposition.
For sure.
That I haven't learned how to win that battle. So I tried to play along. I was like, listen, if you're going to watch, you got to watch positive, good content, and tell me something you learned. You can watch your junk, not bad stuff, but you can watch unboxing videos, all this dumb stuff the kids were, not dumb, but stuff the kids were into. But you got to learn stuff first. So you'd watch astronomy videos or volcano videos.
That's cool.
But around this same point, my wife's younger cousins, Zindy and Isaac and Monica, would be like, you're a news guy. Why don't you go on TikTok? That's where we get our news. And I remember what Facebook did to news and disinformation and misinformation. I was like, this sounds terrible. TikTok's a place for dances and trending whatever.
So
like, how's their
news?
So they show me Washington Post, LA Times, New York Times. And I was like, this is interesting. So what I ended up doing in the new year 2022, my grandma's birthday would have been her 102nd birthday. I started a feed where I would hold the literal newspaper because I'm a newspaper guy at heart. So I still subscribe to the newspaper, both of them, Daily News and LA Times to this day. But I'd hold the newspaper and I just do a synopsis of 2 or 3 LA stories in a minute. And I'd be like, you want to watch TikTok? Then you got to watch this to my son, right?
Yeah.
So at least he's like following LA because he's like, no way I'm reading the newspaper. Even at 8 years old, he's like, dude, people your age don't even read the newspaper. What are you doing here? So he'd start watching those. But news isn't always fun and it isn't always interesting.
Very true.
So I'm always reading books on LA. At the time, I happened to be reading a book by George Geary called Made in California. And I noticed all the fast food chains that came from LA, Panda Express, Fat Burger, In-N-Out, Carl's Jr., McDonald's, Taco Bell, like you name it. They, almost all of them come from LA. Bob's Big Boy. And I just did an episode, the oldest fast food chains that came from LA, hot dog on a stick. And they, that video, quote unquote, went viral. And then I had the idea. I'm like, instead of doing news, maybe do a little history and culture. I live right next to the LA River. I walk across the LA River to work every day. One day I was like, how is this a river? Like I've seen rivers. This is not a river. This is a concrete channel that's dry 9 months a year. And even growing up, I was like, I lived by the river in Sepulveda. There's offshoots of the river. We just called it the Wash. Nobody ever referred to. I knew there was an LA River, but I was like, where's the river? There's no river around here. But it's the LA River. So I did a story right there on the spot where I'm like, what's the history of the LA River? Why does it look like this? And that was the one where it sort of clicked, where I'm like, there's so many questions around Los Angeles. Wherever you drive, whatever street you're on, it's named after somebody. It has a history. Hotels, restaurants, they all have these. And I was always told back in the Valley, LA has no culture. And that's the one that kind of stuck in my craw the most because Los Angeles, dude, you just look around. I mean,
It's
more
the epicenter.
Koreans than anywhere outside of Korea, more Mexicans than anywhere outside of Mexico, more Salvadorians, more Eritreans, more Ugandans, more Thai, more Cambodians, Armenians, Persians.
Yeah.
Los Angeles has more of whatever people you could throw a dart than anywhere outside of their respective countries. And I'm like, dude, you want to talk culture? Let's just look for it and peel off those layers of the onion one at a time. So it started with, my love of LA, my quest of information, but my son kind of helped me focus subconsciously because I didn't really know or set out to plan to do LA in a minute, but that's what it became. And that was how it sort of evolved.
Oh, I love that.
Really cool.
That is-
I've listened to so many of your podcasts and I was like, this guy's really a journalist.
Yeah.
So I didn't know this background about you.
Thank you.
But it was so deep and so much research and so much background in it.
Dude.
And you really know how to translate that
You
to
deliver
real
it
life.
well.
It's really
Yes.
cool. But I did not know this about you, that your journalism background, but now it makes sense.
Thank you for saying that because
Yeah.
I pride myself on that. And the research and fact checking. I have this saying, I don't know if I coined it. I hadn't heard it previously. It's called accuracy is my currency. So every time I do these videos or do a podcast, I try to come up with like some sweet nuggets of information that people haven't heard or aren't familiar with, but you got to verify, you got to check it. And I think that does come from the journalistic background. So thank you for saying that.
Well,
because
obviously,
I take that as
and your angle of wanting your son to learn it makes it even more understandable because you break it down in a way that's really friendly and
Yeah.
informational and comfortable. So
and quick. Don't
Yeah.
forget in this day
Right.
and age, you can't be, again,
So-
despite my monologue from earlier.
So how do you actually get inspired by new places and destinations?
Well, for instance, like, this is West Hollywood. So I'm like, all right, what's around West Hollywood that I haven't covered? Or what did I cover that it was early? I didn't really know what I was doing. So like Chateau Marmont, Sunset Strip, I'm going to go today and do like a remake or a different angle on those videos. And that's look, I do have a timeline and a calendar and I use an old school whiteboard and things like this. And I know what stories I want to cover. But a lot of it really does come down to where am I going today?
Totally.
Let's be efficient and see if I can do like 2 or 3 videos.
And
So I'll do
maybe-
my homework and research and then like set out and just get it going when I'm on the road.
Yeah, no, it's smart. Well, and maybe it's even like driving by too. I mean, it's like, hi, you drive by a tail of a pup and you're like, oh wait, what's the story with that? Or
Dude, I'm
Yeah.
glad you said that because one of my favorite
Yeah.
is Crossroads of the World. Do you know Crossroads of the
Yes.
World?
down in Hollywood,
It's
right? Just down the
Hollywood,
street.
just down
So
the street.
I saw that my whole life. And it's like, what?
There's not a whole lot
is
going on there
it?
right now.
It used to be like shut down and fenced off.
Yeah.
But there was that big like crossroads. And I was like, is this just a
What is it?
shopping thing? I don't even know. I couldn't. So that was the one day, that was the first time. And this was way early. But I was like, I'm going to pull over right now, look it up and like do an episode on that. So absolutely sometimes when you're driving by something, to be inspired by something like that. Because LA, we're not trained to like celebrate the history and the past of LA, but it is all around
It's
us. Like
so
you
much
just
history
need
here.
to look for it. Yeah. So
So when did you realize you were kind of onto something? Was it with that LA River, or that was more of like, okay, I feel like that was more of an internal thing that you're like,
Yes.
okay, I like this. But like, when did it click? And by the way, I love your story because there's random similarities with my story as far as creating content and wanting to add that value.
Yeah.
And so what was that moment for you where all of a sudden you were like, oh, this is bigger than I ever thought it would be?
you want to know the truth is there is a guy. There is
hasn't
a guy.
happened yet. No, I'm
No.
I'm kidding.
There's a guy named Josh from above Los Angeles.
Oh,
He's
love him.
a drone
Yeah.
guy. So he used to does get these beautiful shot, Dodger Stadium, Mount Baldy, like, anywhere in LA, West
Yeah.
Hollywood, like our skyline is awesome because it's so vast and sometimes so flat. And it's like, you got to understand Los Angeles, right? And seeing it from above and seeing from that perspective is such a unique way of seeing the city.
It's great.
And there's so much. So anyway, he reached out to me one day. I had 300 followers on Instagram. And he's like, buddy, he's like, I love what you're doing. He's like, I think you're going to have 1 million followers one day. He's like, join this influencer group. And I was like, nah, influencer. No. He's like, no, you don't need to like do all the like 10 out of 10 obsessed chef's kiss stuff. But he's like, it's important people that'll engage in with your content and, you engage with theirs. And
Yeah.
But just getting exposure by being in a
Associated.
group
Yeah.
associated. Thank you. So I was like, all right, this is weird because it's food people, fashion people, stuff that maybe I'm not into, but like, I was like, what does this have?
That would be the content you might consume.
And then he's like, dude, trust me. He's like, anybody who sees your content, if they love Los Angeles, they're going to follow. He's like, you're doing it
without
well.
a doubt.
Were you already calling it LA in a minute?
Yeah, it was LA in a minute.
From the beginning?
I wish I would, sorry guys. I wish I knew the moment I thought of that, but I don't. I don't know the moment
Just
I thought
always
of,
called it that.
Yeah, but it was, I think it was because I'm going to tell 2 or 3 stories of LA in a minute.
It probably just that was the same with my brand. Is like I was like I'm just gonna call it this, and then just moved on, and then all of a sudden was like, oh, that ended
and
up
it
being
just when it's natural.
But that's
and
when,
it just
when you have a
works.
good idea like that. So that makes sense for you.
So he really was like the springboard because just getting that exposure got people to see it, and then at that point it was like 300 to 3,000 to 5,000, and then I was on Ryan Seacrest, which I was like, that's crazy that like Ryan Seacrest found out about me. So I did like a 5 to 8 minute interview on Kiss FM on Ryan Seacrest from Santa Barbara, but it was funny because it was a radio. We happened to be on a staycation in Santa Barbara, but I did Ryan Seacrest. That kind of blew up. Then I did KTLA and then Mona Holmes' piece in Eater LA. So each of those were like incremental big jumps. And then at a certain point, you're like, all right, I'm on Access Hollywood with Mario Lopez, which is a national show. And I'm like, all right, there's definitely something here that resonates with people. So I think throughout, and even now still, it's kind of like, I'm just a guy that loves LA and loves going around LA and showing people stuff. So I don't know what it really is, but I know that I want to keep doing it forever and to get recognized and to have opportunities to now like generate revenue, make money and things like this. It's
a business.
Flattering and it is a business, but I try to really keep that heart and soul and authenticity, even though it is a business and not color
You know,
those
we
lines.
talk about this a lot on this podcast about creators who have come to Los Angeles, not necessarily seeking fame, but seeking to do something they really love. Yeah. And it becomes a thing. Yeah. And it just, there's something about LA and West Hollywood that incubates these kinds of things and inspires that kind of attitude and possibility, I guess, right? And it happened with you. That's really cool.
Man, and you mentioned West Hollywood because West Hollywood has always been a bastion of like independent growth. It's always had a spirit of, not contrarianism, but going against the
rebellion.
Rebellion. That is actually the word I'm looking for.
Yeah, because I think about like the rock and roll scene on Sunset Boulevard. Like,
dude,
I mean, but like good rebellion. I think that's where change happens.
Listen,
Good Rebellion. That sounds like either a band name or I'm going to use it for advertising.
Oh, I like it. Or maybe we could start a band.
But think about this. Think about this. West Hollywood, when it was Sherman, was one of the only unincorporated areas in this area because between Beverly Hills and Hollywood, you had this area that was zoned commercially, but they were like, yo, it's prohibition. We want to maybe have some speakeasies and bars. Let's keep the authorities at arm's distance so the county would have to come in if they're breaking up any trouble. But yeah, Mickey Cohen, the gangsters, you had the clubs, like the first big nightclubs in LA were down here. And then you got the rock and roll. Totally. And then you have the LGBTQ movement, which in itself is like such an important uprising in American history. And that all comes from West Hollywood. And I think that that's the spirit of Los Angeles, where it's always a forward-looking city. Yeah. It's a come as you are. And yes, there is a lot of that like pressure in Hollywood and all this stuff. But in LA, it always enables you, whether, I don't know if it's the weather or the lack of like a true skyline where it just seems like all the possibilities are endless.
They are.
And like you said, somebody comes, chases their passion, whatever it is. Like if I always say like, if you're into circular tables and that's your thing, you can start a feed. And if you're genuine and you're authentic and you're passionate, there are people out there that are into whatever you're into. And LA just has this sense of like letting you do whatever you want. And you wake up 300 days a year and it's like this with the perfectly blue sky, perfectly blue, perfect climate. And you're just like, where do I want to go today? The mountains, the beach, the valley, the desert, the lake. You have everything. If it's not in LA, it's within a close trip. So those possibilities are endless. And like, I think that's why it's such a hub for creators. And also because it is close to production studios in Hollywood. And, and just the proximity of that does help though. It's that energy that you kind of feel in the air where it could be motivating and just sort of uplift whatever you're doing.
Yeah, so. I think the world looks at it as dreams are possible in LA. And so, a lot of dreamers come here to try and achieve something interesting.
Yeah.
And you talked earlier about what a melting pot it is here and how, diverse it is. And, obviously West Hollywood is really that way, but I think people come here for that, from all over the world, basically.
It's funny. A neighbor was running once and he stopped me and we had like conversation about Los Angeles. He was telling me he's from Baltimore. And he said he hated LA. And I always hear this refrain. People hate LA when they first, and I get it's a tough place to grasp and wrap your arms around. But he's like, I figured out, he said, I just kept going. I'd go to a different neighborhood. And he's like, I found my people. And he's like, I realized, he's like, whoever your people are, whatever that means to you, they're here in Los Angeles. And I think that that's an important element because it's not like that in every city. You travel for a living, so and there's awesome people everywhere. Totally. There's certain kind of people in certain cities, and sure you can find like somebody you get along with, but LA just has these groups of, demographically, socially, economically, whatever it is, your people are
very
here.
Diverse.
And having a community really helps. So I mean, there's so many different communities and neighborhoods in Los Angeles that
totally
engenders that. Yeah.
No, I know. I love that you bring that up because I know. I mean, I'm a transplant here, but I've now been here 19 years. Wow. So does that mean I've earned my card that I could actually say
that's an endless debate? Transplants versus natives. That's hilarious.
But it's true. There is something about right. There is something about I don't know whether it's in the air, the water, something that allows this creativity for people to just build. And even if they come here for a different dream, maybe they find another dream along the way, but there are so many possibilities here.
Listen, I don't want to harp on this too much, but the truth is you wake up and every day is just this clear, crisp blue day. And you have we're the only major city in the United States with a mountain range in the middle of the city. Again, we always talk about the beach, but mountains, and why I bring that up is because people daydream or just get inspired. There's so many things to get inspired by in the natural sense, like the topographical sense. Yeah. And again, that's in addition to the people and the different cultures. So I just think that LA, and it's always been, kind of the last, go west, young man. Yeah. Like that was the mantra where if you burn a bridge or if you mess something up back where you're from, well, just go to LA. You can have a fresh start in LA. Nobody will know the difference. So I think there's all those elements.
There totally is. Yeah. So question for you. I have this thing that's playing favorites, even though there's no such thing as favorites. I come from a family of a lot of women, so we don't play favorites. Okay. To keep it very fair.
As the only child, you can say that.
Because
if you have more than one kid, you have to.
It's okay.
I have
this is
3 boys. They're all my favorite. But they don't know it.
Yeah. They don't know. But okay, so I mean, obviously, you've got major LA pride and love for all the different neighborhoods. Let's say you're going to spend like an afternoon in West Hollywood or sometime, or you've got friends that are like, hey, I'm going to be there. Are there places that you're like, oh, definitely check this out, when they're in this particular area?
Listen, you mentioned Tail of the Pup, and I think it's cool.
Great.
Because look, it's just a little hot dog stand, but it's
not just shaped, a little hot dog stand.
It's shaped like a hot dog, right? And that might sound a little bit corny, but programmatic architecture was so important to Los Angeles, right? And that's when the building literally looks like the product that it sells. Yeah. There was the brown derby. There was one shaped like a bulldog. Mm-hmm. There's all the ice cream cone. There's all different programmatic buildings. Not too many are left. And Tail of the Pup is left, and it was resurrected. And this is why I think it's important too. It's not just like getting a good hot dog and being able, by the way, to walk around West Hollywood. And I'm gonna get back to Tail of the Pup. But walking around West Hollywood is one of the coolest areas to walk around.
Very walker friendly.
Because it's so walkable. There's more pet owners per capita in West Hollywood than anywhere else in Los Angeles.
That's a fun fact.
I am a huge dog person. Yes. So you always see this, but it feels like a city, but LA never feels like urban, right?
Yeah, there's still a neighborhoody sense to it.
It's neighborhoody, but it's still got like urban qualities, So it's just like a great place to walk around. You could duck in and get some food, get a couple many places to get some good drinks. But going back to Tail of the Pup, why I think it's important is because it's a relic of a bygone time in Los Angeles, right? That was, I think it was built in 1946, and it was No, I think it was before that, but it was by a ballroom dancing couple. Forget the name, somebody in Veloz, but it was like a couple that were ballroom dancers, and opened all this fanfare. And it was when programmatic architecture was a big deal. They sold it 30 years later. It had to move, but you can move this like building because it's not like a huge building. But it was the Sofitel came in and it was on that property and they didn't have anywhere to move. So they had to put it into storage.
Right.
And in comes 1933 group.
Yep, we got Bobby Green. We had him on the show.
Who has spearheaded this movement to like rekindle and revitalize all these old landmarks in Los Angeles, Highland Park Bowl, Idle Hour, which is another programmatic building shaped like a whiskey barrel in North Hollywood. But like bringing that
Formosa,
in.
Formosa.
Formosa. And by the way, you know what? Formosa is probably my favorite place to like duck in and get a drink.
It's very cool.
And you know what I didn't realize is that it's got like a Chinese influenced menu.
Right.
Totally.
And I was like, for some reason, I was thinking old school cafe, Bugsy Siegel, by the way.
Because we would always go for drinks as opposed to eating the food, but their food is great.
That's exactly why, because it was the bar and the train car. And Bugsy Siegel has a safe in the floor because him and Mickey Cohen used to run like bookmaking operations out of the Formosa Cafe. And so it's important to connect with our history. And I just think like, again, 1933 group, Bobby Green, Tail of the Pup, that's reflective of that. Formosa Cafe, maybe even a more like living, breathing, tangible example, but you can do both and you can walk. And that's what makes like West Hollywood so great.
Just a quick story about the Tail of the Pup, which is just right around the corner from where we're sitting right now. It's right at the corner of La Cienega.
Hot dogs after this?
And Santa Monica Boulevard. But when they had to close it and move it out of its existing location down there, the city manager of West Hollywood said, we have to keep this in West Hollywood, and then worked with the 1933 group to find them a spot that would still be in West Hollywood because it was something that needed to be saved. So that's how it ended up right around the corner here.
And it's so important. Again, in the city that's always looking forward, the city of the future, like connecting with our past, I think is something that I really enjoy, and it turns out that a lot of people in Los Angeles do as well. And so seeing those reminders and the contrast and the juxtaposition against, all these future builds and all this kind of stuff is really cool. And I always think, we talked about rock and roll for a little bit. I was a hip hop guy growing up and still am, but my dad was an old hippie. Both my parents were hippies. My dad burned his draft card. My mom burned her bra.
Okay.
So they were like hardcore hippies.
The original burners.
So they used to play a lot of good music, so I was exposed to a lot of that stuff. But The Doors was one that really resonated with me, even before I knew, the whole LA connection, all that kind of stuff. But legendary whiskey, when I did grow up, it was during the era of like Guns N' Roses and stuff like that. So that was the one, that was like, even right before like I got into hip hop, that was my go-to music. And you just think about that, like The Doors and Guns N' Roses are eternally, on the list of most incredible music, like American world otherwise, and both got like their start at the whiskey. And you see the old like pictures with the marquee where it's like The Doors in like 1966 or whatever it is. And then like Guns N' Roses, you're like, that's a lot. That's deep, important world impacting history that all started right there. And then of course, taking in shows growing up and thinking about having some drinks. And then, the Troubadour, the Roxy, like just all kinds of like crazy. I mean, we haven't even talked about like Laugh Factory, improv, stuff
Comedy
like that.
Store.
You want to walk, go to the Sunset Strip. That's a fun place to go explore too.
So I have a couple of fun door stories for you since you love them. So right next door is the La Cienega Motel, which is where Jim Morrison lived for a long period of his time here. And my office actually looks over the door of the, it's closed now. The hotel, you can't get into the hotel. But when it was open before the pandemic, people would stream into that place and just to go into that room because his room where he stayed was right there.
That's pretty cool.
Okay, and then right across the street is the Tail of the Pup. And that building, do you know about that building? That building is where they recorded L.A. Woman, the back side of it. And there's a plaque on the wall that says this is where the Doors did this.
I saw that, and that's like borderline, like mind-blowing, right?
Yeah.
Because
it really is,
it's such an L.A. thing. Because did they preserve it? Not really. Like they just turned it into something. But now they're like, oh, wait, this actually happened here. And you're like, well, that was a lot of iterations ago. So I think it's like a bathroom or something, right? The plaque's like on the bathroom or something. But that's a really cool. I mean, again, and Jim Morrison went to UCLA.
Yeah.
And there was the old urban legend about his locker. Anyway, UCLA. So like LA store, LA woman, of course. But
Yeah.
it's like that kind of stuff. And Jim Morrison and the whiskey and the Sunset Strip are so important for LA having the reputation it does worldwide. You know, like the eyes of the world turn to the Sunset Strip and West Hollywood. And that's why this is really like the core, the epicenter of Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And it's really neat. I like to have that history.
It's so cool. You have such a great story. And by the way, I definitely have a lot of pride for living here and being here, but your enthusiasm for LA, all the different neighborhoods. How many neighborhoods are there?
573 neighborhoods in Los Angeles, more than anywhere else in the world. Again, it's not just the possibilities are endless, but I have this desire to like cover all of it and see all of it, because everywhere I go, it ends up being a good time. And again, the people, the food, the history is everywhere in this city. And I want to see it all. And I want to be that information station that takes it in and then relays it to everybody in fun little tidbits and facts and information. Just come to LA.
Again, for people who haven't followed you yet, let's talk about that. Where do they go to
you can look up LA in a minute and find me anywhere. So LA in a minute on Instagram, TikTok, Threads is kind of coming up recently. I had a couple questions about that at first, but Threads has been making some momentum. Twitter, awesome fun. I'm on Facebook occasionally because I have to be, but it's my lowest engagement. YouTube, LA in a minute, but the podcast is on every platform: Apple, Spotify, Overcast, Audible. In a Minute with Evan Lovett, and that's been gaining a lot of traction recently. So that's a lot of fun. But just look up LA in a Minute in Google or wherever. You're going to be able to find it.
Awesome.
That's awesome.
Well, thank you.
Well, thank you. This was awesome.
Thanks, Evan.